So there was an incident where the couple, who's now deceased, they never saw anything on their property, but there was a handprint that was left somewhere. Wayne King came out to investigate and photograph and take measurements. And so that handprint was 11 inches. So there's 11, there's my hand right there. So you can kind of see the difference. 11 inches by 7 inches wide. And then there was another handprint that was recorded in Fort Bragg, California from February of 1962. And we've had, for the people who get the Bigfoot Times newsletter, we've had many editions almost back to back on the breaking news of a very old case from Fort Bragg. And that handprint was 11 and a half inches long. So just a ginormous handprint, and it doesn't look like just an expanded version of a person's handprint. It looks quite a bit different once you start to look at it. And so in this instance, in Dansville, Wayne King went to investigate, and he says, I'm not going to be releasing the photos until they're copyrighted. I don't think that if they ever saw the photos ever saw the light of day in a newspaper article. But I'll be writing to him. I haven't been in touch with him for a million years, and asking if he could release this information, because this is the data that drives the idea that Bigfoot could possibly be a real species. And so I wanted to talk to you. So that's another case, and that happened in the late 1970s. But that's the type of information, that's the type of evidence that makes the case for Bigfoot compelling.
One time they broke a tree off by me when I was by myself. When I walked out the trail, and here's a broken tree. One time I was camping up by Luzerne with 3 other guys, and I think I got hit with a pine cone. And the other 2 guys were at the campfire, and the other fellow was holding a flashlight for me. So we were a long ways, 30, 40 yards from the wood line, and there was no people. We didn't see any pickups around or anybody else. And they wouldn't have known what we were doing anyhow, but anyhow, got hit with a pine cone. So and then I recorded, I don't know if you guys listened to about 7 minutes of what I call a mad ape in Kentucky.
I guess I recorded it. You seem to be pissed off. Yeah. There's only people back here. Because you're breaking up and calling me. No, that's not a person, that's... That's impressive.
One guy wanted to say it was coy dog, but I don't think any kind of dog could have done what I was recording there. So yeah, I've had quite a few experiences actually.
I start hearing step, crunching in the leaf litter on the game trail. And it took maybe 1 or 2 steps and it stopped. And at this point, I mean, I had already been into Bigfoot for a long time, but Bigfoot was not in my mind at all because I was in a very small town right outside of the property of a high school where my kids went to school. And it was just, and then it hit me and I was like, oh my God, this is a huge 12-point buck. He smells deer estrus on my clothing, and he's following me back to my seat.
Yeah.
And I was like, my heart just started pounding. Yeah. I'm like, this is the biggest deer anybody has ever seen. I'm gonna be on newspapers and magazines. And so I started slowly walking again, and I heard crunch, 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 crunch. Eventually get back to this deadfall where my gun was. And I had a bucket that I was sitting on. And I never turned around. But now I'm thinking, how am I going to reach my shotgun with the least amount of movement?
Right.
Because I don't want to spook it.
Right.
So I was able to reach, grab the barrel of my shotgun. I pulled it up like this, flipped the safety off. In my head, I'm thinking, okay, so I'm going to take 1 step back with my left leg. I'm going to turn at the waist at the same time. It's going to be right there in front of me. I'm going to take the shot. It's going to be in the chest, but he's close enough and it'll go through.
Yeah.
And I went, and I just barely turned, and I heard this, and I hear thump thump. And I turned, and there's nothing. There's nothing. And I'm like looking around, and I'm looking for a big white tail, running away from me. And all I ever heard was boom, boom. I heard 2. I didn't hear 4. I didn't hear 8. I didn't hear 16. I didn't hear it taking off down the trail.
Right.
All I heard was thump thump after a really, really loud exhale. And I start looking for like twigs bouncing, or a leaf, floating back down to the ground or something. And there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I'm like, what the hell? So, I'm all jacked up. My heart's beating really quick. And again, I'm not thinking Bigfoot at all. And I'm like, oh my God, that was the biggest deer anybody would have ever seen. Yeah. And so I stepped 3 steps back into the property that I didn't have permission. I had my shotgun, and I'm looking into the woods. It could have gone far because you didn't hear it running off into the distance. And I'm looking, I'm scanning, I can't see anything. Finally, I walk back. I walk out of that woods into the grassy area that's maintained. And I started walking back down the row of trees to go back to my car, which was about 125, 135 yards. And I'm walking along the edge of the tree line. And as I'm walking, I'm hearing steps in the leaves in the tree line. And I had a pretty decent flashlight. I pulled it off in my hand, shining it. And it's not completely dark yet. I mean, it's getting there, and I'm shining the light in there as I'm walking. And I can hear it. Mm-hmm. I don't see a damn thing. There's no squirrel, there's no deer, there's no turkey, because there's a lot of turkey roost in that area. And it followed me 2/3 of the way to my car, and then it stopped. But when I got very close to the back of the garage, that the house that was on that property, that's when it stopped.
Yeah.
So it didn't go beyond that into, and it wasn't until a couple of years afterwards where I started kind of putting it together. And it's like, that's why, like with my show and, really big shows like Sasquatch Chronicles, or listening to Steve Isdall on YouTube when he reads emails from people who have had experiences, it's constantly putting together what you've heard that makes sense. Yeah. And he always calls them puzzle pieces, and literally they are, because it was kind of all at once that it dawned on me. It's like, okay, so I had 2 footsteps behind me. It didn't sound like a horse trotting. It didn't, And if you listen to a deer walk and a horse walk, it's very similar, other than the clip-clop from the hooves. When you add 2 extra legs into it, it doesn't sound like a human walking. Right. And this sounded like, at first, I honestly thought it was the landowner. And then I convinced myself that it was a deer, but it was always just crunch, 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 crunch. And it wasn't until a couple of years after that I kind of put it all together, and I was like, was it?
Yeah, wow.
I don't know, but when you start hearing, and I guess you can, I guess it's easy to draw a point from A to point B without it being true, but sometimes, like, the simplest answer is the right answer.
Christine Van Aker. She went to the police with her account. It was first her and her 3 girlfriends literally out looking for this monster at night. And I guess they heard growls, according to the YouTube video. And I guess those girls got dropped off, and her mom got in the car, and they were out. And one of these things, I guess a Bigfoot, had come up to the vehicle and apparently put its hand through the windows, which were down on the Impala car, and I'm assuming it gave her a black eye by just putting the palm right into her face, because there's a photo of her that's in several Bigfoot books, early Bigfoot books, of her with the black eye, and she's still living. And I'm just assuming that she received so much ridicule over the years that she kind of probably stopped talking about it. It was pretty warm. I was sleeping in a hammock outside, and the way I remember it, I had the zipper on my sleeping bag open because it was so warm. One of the guys in our crew, because it wasn't just the family, there was other people that were from Texas with us. They came and kind of woke me up. They said, wake up, somebody's throwing rocks. So we're in a heavily wooded area in a campground. And it was hard for me to wake up because I was in a pretty sound sleep. But I did wake up, and he said, somebody's throwing rocks. And so I'm trying to process this information, and then I hear a thud on the dirt, and I said, it really woke me up because I could hear it, that something was being thrown. Got out of my sleeping bag, and the impression I got was that somebody was throwing rocks from a good distance, and the impression I got, having played baseball, is that those rocks were coming in underhanded, like this, being lobbed like this, because you could see it as the rock was landing within the 5 feet. And it was interesting because it was dark out, and these rocks were landing very close to us but not hitting us. I had seen on In Search Of, the long defunct television series with Leonard Nimoy narrating, that one of the people that was interviewed on the show said something like ook ook, because that was a native language of Bigfoot or whatever. And I just remembered that. I never really gave it any thought, but I remember yelling out in the woods from the campground, ook ook. And then what came back was this long drawn out grr. You could just think of it with a G, a lowercase g with a bunch of R's, just grrr. And then it went quiet, and that was it. Everything stopped. No more rocks. We never saw anything. We never saw who was throwing the rocks. The next day, we went up to look, but as that stopped, I was still thinking that someone was playing a prank on us, so I surveyed our party. Were we all accounted for? And everyone, some of the people were sleeping in the Chevy Suburban wagon with the seat folded down, and they had sleeping, and I said, yeah, there they are, they're all there. And so to this day, in that area, I don't know what was throwing the rocks that were the size of about a baseball, but someone was throwing rocks, and I'm open to the possibility that it may have been a Bigfoot, because I don't know any other animal in the woods that could throw rocks.
Right.
And it didn't scare me. It was kind of surreal that something like this could be happening. And so that kind of, again, I wouldn't say it was Bigfoot, but my other option was like, what else could it have been? If it was a person joking, we would have found that person, I think, because we went up to, the way I remember it, this is a long time ago, 42 years ago, we went up with flashlights on that hill, kind of looking around, nothing. So I said, I don't know. It just remains a mystery to me.